She threw it, Ethan. She threw the boiling water. My wife's voice cracked from the porch as I caught Sophie mid-scream, her arm blistering red under the sun. And standing a few feet away, smirking like she'd won something, was Cynthia Grover, vice president of the Willow Bend Estates HOA, holding a clipboard as if that made her God. "You people never listen," she said, lifting her chin. "That rose bush is an unauthorized modification. I told you, no personal landscaping within 10 feet of the community walkway." Her tone didn't shake, not once, as if the scalded skin on my 10-year-old daughter's arm was just collateral damage in her perfect world of painted fences. I stepped forward, chest tight. "You just assaulted a child, Cynthia." Her smile didn't falter. "Then file your complaint," she said. "The board will review it." Here's the part she didn't know. I built this neighborhood's drainage system myself. Every sidewalk, every corner slope, every storm channel. I knew exactly which square inch of that soil belonged to me, and which didn't. That rosebush was on private property, concrete anchored, legally untouchable. If you've ever seen someone so sure of their power that they forget consequences, hit subscribe right now, because by the time I finish this story, you'll see how quickly that power can burn down everything they built. I'm Ethan Rowe, structural engineer. I design neighborhoods like this for a living, places meant to hold families, not break them. And the woman who just burned my daughter wasn't just an overzealous neighbor. She was a bureaucrat with a clipboard and a personal grudge, hiding behind HOA bylaws she barely understood. She'd been waiting weeks to humiliate my family, but this was beyond a citation. The rosebush she ordered removed wasn't just any plant. It was the last thing my daughter planted with her grandmother before she passed away last winter. Every morning, Sophie would water it before school, talking to it like her grandma could still hear. It had become our small act of rebellion in a neighborhood that punished individuality. Cynthia wanted it gone because it wasn't uniform. She called it an eyesore. When I first moved to Willow Bend, I'd believed in order, neat lawns, consistent paint shades, measured drainage. I believed in rules, but rules without compassion, that's rot disguised as structure. Cynthia had fined us twice already, first for a wind chime she claimed violated sound harmony, then for a cracked driveway slab that I'd already scheduled to fix. I'd stayed polite, I'd followed the procedures, but today she crossed into criminal territory, and she did it in public, right under the community's camera poles. Sophie's whimpers sliced through the afternoon air. I could still smell the steam from the spill, hear the faint click of Cynthia's pen as she scribbled notes. No apology, no shock, just procedure. "You'll receive a notice," she said, eyes flicking toward my wife. "Next time, I'll have the maintenance team remove it personally." Lauren froze in the doorway, phone trembling in her hand. She wasn't just my wife, she was a property law attorney, and in that moment, her silence wasn't fear, it was calculation. I turned to Cynthia. "You're standing on recorded footage," I said evenly, "and you just trespassed onto private property during an unsanctioned inspection." Her pen stopped midair. "Excuse me?" "The board's quarterly inspection is next month," I said. "Today isn't on the schedule. You just violated procedural protocol and acted as an HOA representative. That means any damage done today is the HOA's legal responsibility, not yours alone." For the first time, her eyes flickered, one beat of hesitation before she gathered herself. "You wouldn't dare drag the HOA into this." I met her stare, steady as bedrock. "You threw boiling water at a child. You dragged them into it yourself." Behind me, Lauren was already taking photos, documenting injuries, time-stamping the scene, marking every inch of the scorched ground. My wife knew how these people worked: deflect, deny, delay. But we weren't just homeowners anymore. We were plaintiffs waiting for the paperwork. As the ambulance lights painted our white picket street red and blue, neighbors peeked through blinds, whispering. Some pretended not to see, others filmed quietly. And I realized then, this wasn't just about us. This community was built on fear, disguised as order. People complied because they couldn't afford to fight. But I could. When Lauren followed the ambulance, I stayed behind. Cynthia was still there, clipboard hugged to her chest like armor. She looked smaller now, still angry but less certain. "You should have stayed quiet, Ethan," she said. I looked at her, then at the rosebush, half wilted but standing. "Quiet is how you get away with this." She flinched just once. I walked back inside, blood still boiling hotter than her tea, already knowing what came next. This wouldn't end in a meeting or a fine. It would end in court, and the woman who hid behind bylaws was about to learn how easily numbers and clauses can crush a life when the math isn't in her favor. 7 days later, Lauren found the first crack in Cynthia's kingdom, a payment trail that would turn our pain into her ruin. The morning after the assault, the neighborhood looked the same: perfect lawns, clipped hedges, symmetrical driveways. But something had shifted. 7 days later, Lauren sat across from me at the kitchen table, a manila folder between us, her expression tight. "The HOA is already trying to bury it," she said. "Cynthia filed a counter-complaint. Claims you were aggressive and that she tripped, accidentally spilled the water." She slid the printed notice toward me. It was typed in the same bureaucratic tone as every other HOA warning: neutral, bloodless, and weaponized. The words blurred for a second before I caught a detail that made my chest burn. No witnesses present. Except there were. The neighborhood security cameras had recorded everything, and 3 neighbors had been standing on their porches when it happened, but none had come forward. Not one. That's when I understood. Fear in Willow Bend wasn't an accident. It was a system. Cynthia didn't need to shout to control people. She just needed to find them once, remind them who decided property value. Lauren leaned back, tapping her pen against the file. "They've also added daily fines for obstructing maintenance access. That's the rosebush." "She's doubling down," I said. "She's testing if we'll fold." Lauren's tone was flat, calculated. "We won't." The HOA office was inside the old clubhouse, a faux colonial building with glass doors and a smell of bleach. I walked in the next morning to contest the charges. The board sat behind a long table, Cynthia in the middle, flanked by the president and secretary. A flag stood behind them, as if they were holding court. "Mr. Rowe," Cynthia said smoothly, "we received your notice of intent to dispute the violation. Unfortunately, your conduct last week," I cut her off, "was self-defense after you assaulted a child." A few heads turned. The board president cleared his throat. "We're here to maintain civility." Cynthia's smile was thin. "Your wife's filing has no merit. The HOA has full indemnity. If you persist, you'll be in violation of Section 4A, member defamation of board officials." They were confident, too confident. That's how you talk when you think the paperwork will shield you from truth. I stayed silent for a moment, then placed a printed diagram on the table. The land survey for my lot, stamped by the county. That rosebush sits 18 inches inside private property, not common ground. You find me illegally. The president frowned. Cynthia's eyes narrowed but didn't move. "This survey," I continued, "was filed with the county engineering office by me. I designed your drainage layouts." That got their attention. A few members exchanged looks. The silence stretched. "Mr. Rowe," Cynthia said finally, her tone brittle, "you can appeal through proper channels. Until then, fines remain active." I picked up my copy of the notice and left it there. "Then we'll handle it through proper channels, court channels." Outside, sunlight hit the metal sign that read, "Willow Bend Estates HOA Office, preserving our standards." I almost laughed. Standards, that's what they called it. Back home, Lauren was already drafting the first set of letters. She'd filed for medical documentation, secured Sophie's injury photos, and submitted our insurance denial notice to the state regulator. "You were right," she said without looking up. "The HOA policy lists Cynthia as the alternate contact for claims. That's illegal." I paused. "How illegal?" "Enough that the insurance company could withdraw coverage entirely." The first crack in Cynthia's foundation had appeared. That evening, while Sophie slept with bandaged arms, I sat outside under the porch light. The rosebush still stood, one wilted flower curling against the wind. Across the street, porch lights flicked off one by one. People were watching. They always were. But silence was safer than involvement. Graham Lowe, the HOA treasurer, passed by with his dog. He slowed near our fence but didn't stop. Still, his eyes lingered longer than usual. Guilt. I recognized it instantly. He gave a small nod, like an apology he didn't have the courage to voice, and kept walking. Lauren came out, laptop still open. They scheduled an emergency board session tomorrow. Topic: community conduct and false claims. It's about us. Let them talk, I said. The more they put in writing, the better. She studied me for a moment, then sat beside me. You're not angry anymore. I looked at the rose bush, its roots holding strong in the soil I poured myself. Anger burns out, pressure doesn't. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler clicked on, rhythmic and cold. That's how Willow Bend worked. Perfect timing, perfect appearances, everything uniform. But systems built on control always have weak joints. And Cynthia had just exposed hers. If you've ever dealt with people who think they're untouchable because they hide behind titles, hit subscribe right now, because the moment you find their weakness, it's over for them. Lauren closed her laptop, eyes steady. Tomorrow, we start cracking her open. By the next dawn, we had every violation, bylaw, and financial statement printed and pinned across the kitchen wall. And right in the middle, circled in red, was Cynthia's name. The next evening, the HOA's community conduct meeting filled the clubhouse with tension thick enough to taste. Every folding chair faced the same long oak table where Cynthia Grover sat. Flawless posture, pearl earrings, hands folded like a queen ready to preside over the guilty. Her voice echoed through the intercom system. This gathering, she began, is to address the false claims and inflammatory behavior of certain residents whose accusations have disrupted community peace. She didn't need to name me. Everyone knew. Lauren and I stood near the back, her phone discreetly recording. My heart thudded steady, not from fear but focus. Across the room, Graham Lowe adjusted his tie with shaking hands. The HOA treasurer looked pale, sweat darkening his collar. When our eyes met, he dropped his gaze instantly. The guilt was written in his shoulders, rounded, tense, shrinking. He'd seen what happened that day, and now, trapped between decency and fear, he was breaking silently. Cynthia's tone hardened. The HOA takes allegations of misconduct seriously. However, Mr. Rowe's accusations of assault have been found inconsistent with multiple accounts. I stepped forward before she could continue. Accounts written by the same people you pay. A few neighbors gasped. Cynthia's jaw twitched. Mr. Rowe, this is not your platform. No, I said, calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. It's yours, and it's collapsing. Lauren's hand brushed my arm, a subtle signal. Don't go too far yet. I stayed still, letting silence hang long enough for everyone to feel it. That silence worked better than shouting. People leaned forward. Even Graham stopped fidgeting. Cynthia adjusted her papers, trying to regain rhythm. This meeting will maintain decorum. I looked at Graham again, his lips pressed tight, eyes darting toward the exit, then back to Cynthia. His leg bounced under the table like a trapped nerve. He wanted out, but something in him, fear of losing status maybe, kept him tethered. Lauren whispered, "He's going to crack." Cynthia turned her attention to the board. The Rowe family has now filed for insurance review of the HOA policy. This was done without board consultation, an abuse of procedural order. Lauren spoke up this time, voice clear as a courtroom bell. That review was filed legally under state code. Because your vice president listed herself as an alternate insured party, you used community funds for personal protection, Mrs. Grover. Murmurs rippled across the room. Cynthia's mask slipped for half a second, a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Then she smiled again. Wild accusations. Our treasurer has approved every expenditure. Every head turned toward Graham. His pen slipped from his fingers and clattered against the floor. The sound cracked the room open. He bent to pick it up, but his hands trembled so violently that it rolled away again. When he stood, his face was flushed, eyes glassy. Cynthia pressed on. Isn't that correct, Graham? He swallowed hard. His gaze moved between us, then down to his ledger book. All expenses were authorized, he said quietly, voice almost cracking on the last word. I saw it, his body telling the truth his mouth couldn't. Shoulders stiff, fingers flexing around the pen like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Cynthia smiled as if she'd just won a round. Then we're finished here. Lauren stepped forward. No, we're not. She slid a printed spreadsheet onto the table, one of the public financial records. This shows a $4,800 withdrawal categorized as legal retainer. Same date your vice president hired her private counsel. Coincidence? Graham's lips parted, a faint exhale escaping. Cynthia's hand shot toward the paper, but Graham beat her to it. He took it, stared at the numbers, and for a moment forgot the audience. His brow furrowed, eyes darting across the columns. Then his jaw clenched and his hand trembled again, but this time not from fear, from realization. He looked up at Cynthia, then back at us. His throat worked, trying to form words. I wasn't informed of this transaction, he whispered. That single sentence sent a spark through the room. Cynthia straightened, voice sharp. That's enough, Graham. But he didn't sit back. He pushed the paper toward the center of the table with shaking fingers. You told me this was an insurance payment, he said, louder now, the tremor still in his hands. You said it was to protect the association. Cynthia hissed. You're mistaken. He didn't answer, just leaned back, shoulders slumped under invisible weight. His eyes met mine again, apology clear in the tired sag of his features. Lauren whispered, That's the moment. Cynthia gavelled the meeting closed, voice trembling for the first time. We'll reconvene privately. Meeting adjourned. But everyone in that room had already seen the shift. As people filed out, Graham lingered behind. He avoided my gaze, then finally muttered, I didn't know it had gone that far. His voice was low, hoarse, like the confession scraped his throat raw. I nodded once. You can still make it right. He hesitated, looking toward the door where Cynthia's silhouette disappeared, then back to us. His hand ran through his hair, shaking. I'll think about it. That night, I replayed the scene in my head, the dropped pen, the trembling voice, the tiny crack in Cynthia's perfect wall of control. She thought fear would keep everyone silent. She forgot that guilt doesn't stay buried. It festers until it rots the foundation. And by morning, that foundation would start to crumble. By sunrise, word had already spread. The neighborhood group chat was on fire, half defending Cynthia, half asking if what they heard was true. Lauren scrolled through screenshots while sipping coffee, her tone unreadable. They're trying to frame it as a misunderstanding, she said. Cynthia's claiming the funds were part of a community legal reserve. She turned her phone toward me. The message thread glowed. No misconduct occurred, misinterpretations fueled by outside influence. Typical damage control, polished, cold, and manipulative. I looked out at the front yard where the rosebush stood under a morning drizzle. Its petals were half gone now, edges burned brown where the scalding water had hit. Sophie still refused to come outside. Her world had shrunk to hospital visits and whispered updates. Every bruise on her arm felt like another fine I'd been forced to pay. Lauren placed her mug down. They scheduled an emergency audit review tonight. Cynthia's bringing in an accountant, probably to sanitize the numbers. Then we'll bring the truth, I said. I spent the day at my office downtown. My coworkers knew me as the calm one, the engineer who found stability in chaos. But even they noticed the storm behind my focus. I pulled every HOA design schematic I'd ever submitted to the city and cross-referenced construction permits. The HOA wasn't supposed to modify anything structural without county approval. Yet, 3 months ago, I'd noticed new drainage lines being dug near the park, unauthorized, and signed off by none other than Cynthia Grover. Lauren called around noon. I checked with the county clerk, she said. No filed modifications. If she approved construction without a permit, that's another violation, and one that affects liability coverage. That's when I realized this wasn't just personal vengeance anymore. It was the lever we needed to move the entire system. That evening, the HOA board gathered inside the community park pavilion, a white-painted structure overlooking the retention pond. The kind of place meant for barbecues and birthday parties, now turned into a political battlefield. The air smelled like rain and wet grass. Cynthia sat beneath the hanging lights, wearing a coral blazer like armor. Beside her, a man in a navy suit arranged folders, the accountant. When we entered, conversation stilled. Cynthia smiled thinly. Ah, the Rose, here to make another scene? Lauren ignored her and set down a folder. Here to correct one. I stood behind my wife as she spread out printed county records across the table. According to these, she said evenly, you authorized construction without approval from the municipal engineering office. You signed the document as vice president. Cynthia laughed, brittle and loud. That's ridiculous. Routine maintenance doesn't require filing. I leaned forward just enough for her to see I wasn't bluffing. The new drainage runs under the common walkway, public easement. That's not maintenance. That's structural modification. I designed that system, Cynthia. And the county seal you ignored, that's my signature. Her face blanched, ever so slightly. The accountant's eyes flicked up from his notes, uncertain. Lauren continued. By altering public drainage without authorization, you violated state code. That exposes the HOA, and you personally, to financial liability. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd of residents standing under umbrellas nearby. Cynthia slammed her pen onto the table. This is a witch hunt. Lauren didn't flinch. No, this is what accountability looks like. I glanced toward the treasurer's chair. Empty. Graham hadn't shown up, but even in his absence, his voice lingered in every tremor of Cynthia's tone. She knew her safety net was slipping. The accountant quietly cleared his throat. Ms. Grover, may I see the original invoices for that project? Her silence was answer enough. When the meeting ended, rain poured harder. Cynthia stormed out without another word, heels stabbing puddles. Residents whispered in clusters. Some approached Lauren with questions. Others avoided eye contact, afraid of taking sides. We walked home soaked but quiet. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood didn't feel untouchable. It felt unstable, as if the very ground beneath its perfect sidewalks had begun to shift. Lauren glanced at me as we reached the porch. If we can tie those drainage lines to HOA funds, she's finished. We'll tie it, I said, and we'll pull the entire board down with her if we have to. Thunder rolled overhead as we stepped inside. Sophie was asleep on the couch, arms still wrapped in gauze. I looked at her, then at the rosebush through the window, petals beaten flat by the rain, but still rooted strong. Lauren whispered, "She's not giving up quietly." "Neither are we," I said. "She built her empire on money that wasn't hers. Time to let gravity do the rest." Somewhere down the street, floodwater hissed through the new pipes Cynthia had ordered. Pipes she wasn't supposed to touch. And I knew that, soon enough, those same lines would lead straight back to her signature, her account, her downfall. The next morning, I woke to the sound of water hammering against the pavement. Overnight rain had turned Willow Bend's perfect streets into shallow streams. The new drainage lines, Cynthia's unapproved project, were failing. Gutters overflowed, lawns flooded, and the pristine walkway outside the clubhouse was half submerged. It was poetic, almost cruelly so. Her own handiwork was drowning her kingdom. Lauren was already on the phone with the city. "Public Works says they never signed off on this," she said, pacing the kitchen. "They're sending an inspector this afternoon to assess damages. That's our chance, Ethan. If they find unpermitted work, it ties directly to her name." I nodded, watching through the window as water rushed past the rosebush, bending the stems but not breaking them. "Then we'll meet them there." By mid-afternoon, the clouds broke into a dull gray light. I drove to the community park, where city trucks were already parked near the maintenance shed. 2 inspectors in neon vests examined the drainage grates, one shaking his head. "These aren't our specs," he muttered. "Wrong grade slope, no permit tag." Cynthia arrived minutes later, face tight with forced civility. "Gentlemen," she called out, "I'm the vice president of the HOA board. We approve those updates for safety." The lead inspector looked unimpressed. "Approved by who?" She hesitated, then gestured vaguely toward the clubhouse. "The board." I stepped forward. Funny, since the board has no authority to alter public infrastructure without county approval, I would know. I designed the original plans. Recognition flickered across the inspector's face when I handed him a copy of my stamped blueprint. "You're the row from the county project logs." "That's right." Cynthia's smile faltered, just slightly. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You can't just—" The inspector cut her off. "Ma'am, this could fall under unauthorized municipal modification. If these lines backflow into residential property, you're looking at thousands in damages." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The rain had already done the talking. When the inspectors left to file their preliminary report, Cynthia turned to me, fury barely contained. "You think this proves anything? The HOA handles its own liabilities." Lauren's voice came from behind her. "Not when it violates state code." She stepped into view, holding a clipboard with printed HOA bylaws. Section 9B, liability extends to individual officers acting beyond authorized scope. That means you, Cynthia. Cynthia's jaw clenched, but her eyes flicked toward the maintenance shed, where a few residents had gathered, whispering. The witnesses were multiplying. By evening, we were back home. Lauren sat on the couch, laptop glowing. City records just went live, she said. They've flagged Willow Bend for compliance review. That triggers the HOA's insurance audit automatically. That's when it hit me. The strategy wasn't just working, it was accelerating. One bad drainage decision had set off a chain reaction that would strip her of every financial defense she had left. A soft knock came at the door. When I opened it, Graham Lowe stood there, hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets, rain still dripping from his hair. He looked like a man halfway between confession and collapse. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Lauren gave me a look but nodded. I led him to the porch, where the air still smelled of wet earth and guilt. He didn't sit, just hovered near the railing, eyes darting everywhere but mine. "She called me," he said. "Cynthia, after the meeting, told me to delete the transaction logs from the reserve account." "And did you?" He shook his head. "No, I couldn't, but she'll know I didn't. She's already blaming me for the audit." "Then stop covering for her, Graham. She's not protecting you. She's setting you up." He ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. "You don't get it. I've been on this board for 9 years. My name's on every ledger. If she goes down, so do I." Lauren stepped outside, calm and deliberate. "Not if you cooperate. If you testify that she used HOA funds for personal expenses, the liability shifts." He hesitated, eyes flicking to the rosebush glistening in the yard. "That thing survived, huh?" "It's tougher than it looks," I said. He nodded slowly, gaze softening. "I guess so." He took out a folded sheet of paper, edges damp from rain. "I printed these before she told me to wipe the files. HOA payments to a personal account, her account. I didn't come here to be a hero. I just couldn't keep pretending." Lauren unfolded the paper carefully, scanning the numbers. "This is it. Direct transfer from the reserve fund. Date matches her lawyer's retainer." Graham's shoulders sagged, relief and fear wrestling across his face. "Do what you need to. Just don't let her know it came from me." I nodded. "You did the right thing." He left without another word, walking into the mist, a man halfway between cowardice and courage. Inside, Lauren locked the door and looked at me. "We have proof." Outside, thunder rumbled low across the sky, rolling over the flooded lawns like a warning. The money trail was real, and by the time the audit finished, Cynthia Grover would have nowhere left to hide. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the neighborhood felt heavier, like the air itself carried secrets. Lauren was already at the dining table, coffee untouched, scanning through emails from the State Insurance Bureau. "They've opened a formal review," she said, her tone sharp with controlled satisfaction. "They'll be investigating the HOA's liability coverage and financial management. Cynthia's name is listed as the primary contact." That meant the fuse was lit. I looked at the clock, 9:32 a.m. Sophie was still asleep upstairs, her arm wrapped in gauze, the soft sound of cartoons murmuring from her room. For her, the world was still simple. Bad people hurt you, good people fix it. But here in Willow Bend, the bad people wore suits and sent emails instead of apologies. Lauren's phone buzzed again. She frowned, then handed it to me. "Listen." It was a voicemail, Cynthia's voice calm but venomous. "You can threaten lawsuits all you want, Lauren, but when this community loses its insurance because of your husband's obsession, every homeowner will know who to blame." Lauren's lips curled into a humorless smile. "She's panicking," I nodded. "Then it's working." We drove to the county administration office, a beige building that smelled like old carpet and bureaucracy. The insurance bureau's investigator, a woman named Angela Perez, met us in a small conference room. She was matter-of-fact, efficient, the kind of person who'd seen too many neighborhood wars. "I reviewed the documents you sent," Angela said. "There's clear indication that the HOA's vice president used community funds for personal legal fees. That's misappropriation under the state's non-profit code." Lauren leaned forward. "She also authorized construction without permit, resulting in property damage." Angela nodded. "The city's engineering department flagged that too. This case qualifies for combined review. Insurance fraud and financial misconduct." It was the first time anyone had used the word fraud out loud. Hearing it felt like oxygen. Angela continued, "We'll be freezing the HOA's general operating account pending verification, but we'll need witness cooperation to finalize the report." I knew immediately who she meant. Graham Lowe? Angela looked up. "If he corroborates, we can pursue restitution. Without him, it's circumstantial." We left the building under a bright, cold sun. Lauren slid her sunglasses on, jaw set. Then we find him before Cynthia does. The search led us to Lakeside Diner, the quiet breakfast spot on the far edge of town. Through the window, I saw Graham in a corner booth, stirring his coffee like he wanted to disappear into it. When we walked in, he froze mid-motion. "I told you not to involve me anymore," he muttered as we sat down. Lauren placed a folder on the table, voice low. "You're already involved. Cynthia's trying to pin this on you." His eyes darted around the room, scanning for anyone watching. "She called this morning," he said the board was going to restructure. That's code for scapegoating me. "She's right about one thing," I said. "There will be restructuring after she's gone." Graham rubbed his temples. "You don't get it. She's already shredding records. She's terrified, but she'll burn the whole HOA before she lets anyone see the books." Lauren leaned closer. "You have two choices: stay silent and go down with her, or cooperate and walk away clean." He looked at her, then at me, his hand trembling slightly against the coffee mug. "Angela Perez called me too," he said quietly. "She said the same thing." "So, what did you tell her?" He hesitated, then exhaled. "I said I'd think about it." "That's not good enough," Lauren said softly. "You saw what she did to our daughter. You know what she's capable of." Something shifted in him then. His posture straightened, his face hardening with a quiet kind of guilt. "You're right," he said. "I'll call her. I'll give a statement." I nodded once. "Do it now, before she convinces you not to." He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and dialed. The call was short, maybe 30 seconds, but when he hung up, he looked lighter. "She's meeting me tomorrow for a recorded interview," he said. "That's enough," Lauren replied. "Once her statement's in, the state can freeze all HOA assets." Outside, wind swept across the parking lot, cold and sharp. Graham lingered a moment before leaving, shoulders hunched but steps steadier. He wasn't free yet, but for the first time, he'd chosen a side. As we drove home, Lauren's phone pinged with an alert from the HOA website. Community update, temporary account access suspended. Cynthia was feeling the heat. Lauren smiled faintly. "She knows it's over." "Not yet," I said, watching the neighborhood come into view, sunlight glinting off the flooded sidewalks. "But by the time that audit closes, she'll wish she'd never touched a single dollar that wasn't hers." Back at the house, Sophie opened the door before we even parked. "Dad!" The rosebush bloomed again, and there it was, 3 small red buds, bright against the mud, proof that some things survive fire, storms, and tyranny. By the end of that week, Cynthia Grover's empire of fines and fear would collapse, not from rage, but from math. By the next evening, the neighborhood looked almost peaceful again. Birds back in the trees, sprinklers hissing quietly across perfect lawns. But underneath that calm, the air was coiled tight. Lauren was on the porch, laptop open, reviewing legal drafts while I checked the front camera feed. "She hasn't been seen all day," I said. "No morning walk, no clipboard patrol." Lauren didn't look up. "She's hiding. Auditors are on site tomorrow. She'll try something tonight." She was right. People like Cynthia never surrendered quietly. They tried to erase the evidence before it landed in someone else's hands. And the only person who could stop that from happening was the same man who'd spent years signing off on her lies. At dusk, a car pulled up near the mailbox. Graham Lowe stepped out, glancing around like he expected to be watched. His movements were jittery, every step hesitant, but his jaw was set. He walked straight toward the porch, clutching a worn briefcase like it contained his conscience. "I didn't sleep last night," he said. His voice was rough, exhausted. "I can't keep pretending I didn't see what she did." Lauren closed her laptop. "You called the investigator, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, gave a short statement, but it's not enough. You need to see this." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of printed ledger pages, each stamped with HOA headers. "I printed the reconciliations before Cynthia ordered them deleted. There's one transfer she tried to hide, a payment marked as community improvement. It's the drainage project. Lauren took the papers carefully. And the account number? Graham swallowed hard. Belongs to her personal LLC, I checked. She paid herself under the pretense of subcontracting. That one sentence changed everything. Misuse of community funds was one thing. Self-dealing was another. This wasn't negligence. It was fraud, plain and prosecutable. Graham's hand shook as he lit a cigarette, even though he wasn't supposed to smoke here. She told me it was temporary, said she'd reimburse it once the fines started coming in from residents. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. I've been treasurer for 9 years. If she goes down, I look complicit. Lauren leaned forward. You can fix that by testifying. You'll lose your position, yes, but you'll keep your freedom. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Freedom's expensive. Cynthia paid me comfort instead. I could see the war happening behind his eyes, the fear of exposure against the guilt eating him alive. He looked toward the streetlight flickering at the corner, then back to us. You know what the worst part is? He whispered. She used the HOA's emergency reserve, fund to pay her lawyer, money meant for storm damage repairs, and now half this street's flooded because of her damn drainage scheme. Lauren's expression hardened. That's public endangerment. The state will seize her assets once they verify this. He flicked ash over the railing, his shoulders sagging. I should have stopped her when I still could. I saw her rewrite meeting minutes, backdate signatures, even delete expense receipts. I told myself she was just overzealous. She made me believe it was for the good of the community. But it was never about the community. It was about control. His voice broke on that last word. I didn't speak for a long moment. Then I asked, Why now, Graham? Why finally tell the truth? He looked down at the cigarette burning between his fingers. Because of your kid, he said quietly. When she screamed that day, I saw my granddaughter in her face, and I realized if I didn't stop this, I was helping it happen. Lauren reached for her phone, typing quickly. We'll send these to Angela tonight. Once the Bureau confirms, they can freeze her accounts before she moves the money. Graham's eyes darted up. You think she already knows? She suspects, Lauren said, but she doesn't know we have the documents. He exhaled shakily. Then I guess there's no turning back. Not anymore, I said. The three of us stood there for a moment, the porch light flickering between us. It felt like the world had shifted, quietly, invisibly. Graham looked like a man who'd finally stepped out of the shadow he'd lived under for years, though the weight of guilt still clung to his frame. When he finally spoke again, his voice was steadier. She's planning to drain the reserve account tonight. I overheard her on a call this morning. If you want proof, check the HOA server logs after 8. She'll move it to her lawyer's escrow. Lauren met my eyes. Then we don't wait for morning. Graham nodded once, almost like a confession had bought him a sliver of peace. Do what I couldn't, he said. End it. He walked down the steps, disappearing into the dark street. For a long time after he was gone, no one spoke. The night felt dense with unfinished business. Lauren finally exhaled. This is it, Ethan, the last domino. I looked at the rosebush glowing faintly in the streetlight, its petals damp and red as fresh truth. Then, let's make sure it falls. We didn't sleep that night. The house was lit only by the soft blue of Lauren's laptop screen, spreadsheets and emails glowing like evidence waiting to breathe. Graham's confession had given us everything, transaction records, account numbers, timestamps, but we needed one more thing, confirmation that Cynthia was moving the money, proof in motion, not on paper. Lauren's fingers flew across the keyboard. The HOA server logs update every 6 hours, she said. If she's transferring funds tonight, it'll show up in the activity feed by dawn. I stood by the window, staring out at Willow Bend's spotless streets. Every house was silent, curtains drawn tight. It looked like perfection. Manufactured peace sitting on top of corruption. Somewhere out there, Cynthia Grover was probably pacing her marble kitchen, clutching her phone, convincing herself she could still win. Once this breaks, I said quietly, she won't just lose her position. She'll lose her home. Lauren didn't look up. Good. Let her feel what she made everyone else afraid to feel. Around midnight, a soft ping from her laptop broke the silence. There it is, she whispered. Unauthorized access from the admin account. Cynthia's credentials. The HOA's financial dashboard filled the screen, numbers flickering as if the system itself was sweating. A new transfer request blinked in progress. $14,200 from HOA Reserve Emergency Fund to C. Grover Consulting, LLC. Lauren's voice was steady. She's doing it right now. We needed to preserve that moment before she could erase it. Lauren took screenshots, time-stamped them, then opened an email draft to the Insurance Bureau's investigator. We'll send this straight to Angela with Graham's documents. That's enough to freeze the account before the funds leave. Before she could hit send, headlights washed across our window. A car slowed in front of the house. My stomach tightened. Cynthia's black sedan. She's here, I said. Lauren closed the laptop and whispered, "Don't open the door." But I already was. I stepped outside into the humid night. Cynthia stood at the curb, arms crossed, her voice sharp through the quiet. "You think you've won, Ethan?" Her tone cracked at the edges, rage mixed with desperation. "You think anyone cares what some petty homeowner says? You've destroyed your own neighborhood." "No," I said, calm as stone. "You did that when you stole from it." She took a step closer, her perfume cutting through the air like disinfectant. "You think this will end me? I built Willow Bend. Every inch of it, every rule. People respect me." "People fear you," I said. "Not the same thing." Her hand shook slightly, though she tried to hide it. "I have friends in county offices, lawyers who actually know what they're doing." Lauren appeared behind me, holding up her phone. "Then you might want to call them now, because the State Insurance Bureau just received proof of your wire transfer in real time." Cynthia's eyes widened. "You're bluffing." Lauren hit send. "Not anymore." For a second, the night froze. No sound, no movement. Just the two of us staring at her as the weight of her empire started to tilt. Then she turned, stormed back to her car, and drove off so fast her tires squealed against the pavement. Inside, the air felt electric. Lauren's phone buzzed within. Minutes, a reply from Angela Perez. "Received. Freezing accounts pending verification. Excellent work." Lauren sank into a chair, finally letting her shoulders drop. "It's done," she said, breathless. "Not yet," I answered. "She'll fight back. She'll spin it. And we'll be ready." We spent the next hour assembling everything into one clean package. Screenshots, receipts, Graham's confession, construction violations, medical photos. It wasn't just a legal file. It was a map of corruption from top to bottom. I could almost feel the structure collapsing in my mind. Each line item, another beam giving way under truth's pressure. When the email package finally sent, the clock read 3:27 a.m. Rain began again outside, softer this time, cleansing instead of drowning. The rosebush glistened under the porch light, alive despite everything. Lauren leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever feel guilty?" she asked quietly. "For what?" "For destroying her." I looked out at the street, the flawless lawns that had cost neighbors peace for years. "No, because she built this place on fear. I'm just restoring balance." The next morning, we woke to chaos. Cars lined the street. Residents gathered around the HOA office, phones in hand. Someone shouted that the HOA's bank account had been frozen overnight. Maintenance crews were suspended, fines voided. Cynthia's car was parked crooked in front of the clubhouse, doors locked, blinds drawn. Lauren joined me at the window. "It's starting." I nodded slowly, watching neighbors who'd once whispered now speaking out loud. "When fear breaks," I said, "truth rushes in to fill the space." She smiled faintly. Then we just flooded Willow Bend. The flood that had started in the pipes had finally reached the boardroom, and tomorrow the cleanup would begin. By noon, Willow Bend Estates looked like a crime scene disguised as suburbia. Police cruisers lined the street outside the clubhouse, their lights muted but unmistakable. Residents clustered on sidewalks, phones raised, voices low and urgent. The HOA office door was locked, blinds drawn, and a single piece of paper had been taped to the glass. "Financial audit in progress. Access restricted." Lauren and I parked near the fountain, the one that always ran too loud during board meetings. "She's still in there," Lauren said, scanning the clubhouse windows. "Angela's team is doing a forensic audit on site. Cynthia refused to hand over her laptop, so they brought a warrant." It was surreal, watching the same woman who once fined neighbors for mismatched shutters now hiding behind tinted glass while investigators walked through her kingdom. Every rule she had weaponized was finally turned against her. "Should we go in?" I asked. Lauren shook her head. "Not yet. Let her stew. The audit will do the talking." We stood by the fountain as residents whispered around us. Some looked ashamed, others vindicated. Fear was dissolving fast, replaced by anger. One man muttered, "She charged me $600 for a mailbox she said wasn't the right shade of black." Another woman added, "She fined my kid for leaving a bike near the driveway." Their resentment had been there all along, buried under compliance. All it needed was proof. Half an hour later, the clubhouse door opened. Angela Perez, clipboard in hand, stepped out with 2 investigators and an evidence box. She spotted us immediately and walked over. "You were right," she said. "Unauthorized transfers from the HOA reserve account. Personal payments routed through a shell LLC. She moved funds for years, not months." Lauren exhaled slowly. "How bad is it?" Angela's tone was measured but firm. "Roughly $72,000 misappropriated. It's more than enough for criminal charges." My pulse steadied. "What happens now?" "She's under review for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The court will decide if restitution requires liquidating her assets." "Meaning her house?" Lauren said quietly. Angela nodded. "If the court approves lien seizure, yes." She handed Lauren a folder. "You'll be notified once the case is filed, and Mr. Lowe's testimony sealed it." Graham, he'd done it. We thanked her, but before we could leave, the clubhouse door burst open again. Cynthia stepped out, flanked by her lawyer, face pale and drawn. The same woman who once strutted across lawns now looked hollowed out, her authority leaking from every step. She stopped when she saw us. "You did this," she hissed, voice shaking. "You destroyed everything this community stood for." Lauren faced her squarely. "No, Cynthia, you did when you made control your god." For a second, I thought she might strike her. But instead, Cynthia's voice cracked into something smaller, fragile. "Do you have any idea what it's like to hold this place together? You think people follow rules out of respect? They follow because someone has to scare them into order." "That's not leadership," I said quietly. "That's tyranny with paperwork." Her lawyer tugged her arm. "Ms. Grover, let's go." Cynthia's eyes burned into mine, but this time there was no fire left, just disbelief. Like she was finally realizing she'd lost the only power she'd ever trusted. She turned away muttering, "They'll regret this. You'll all regret this." Then she disappeared into the car, doors slamming like a final chapter closing. The investigators loaded the boxes into a van and drove off. Neighbors began clapping, hesitant at first, then louder, until the whole street echoed with it. Lauren looked at me, almost stunned. "Did we just win?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet. The paperwork says pending seizure. We'll know it's real when that house is empty." That night, we gathered in the community park, the same place. Cynthia had once used for her rule reinforcement meetings, but this time it wasn't the board talking. It was the residents. People brought folding chairs, thermoses, and printed copies of bylaws they finally wanted to rewrite. Lauren stood before them, calm and clear. "From now on, we decide what fairness means here. No fines without evidence, no power without oversight." They applauded again, louder this time. Graham arrived near the end, looking 10 years older, but finally lighter. He walked up to me quietly. "It's done," he said. "She called me before they took her laptop. Told me she'd ruin me too. I told her I'd already signed the affidavit." He let out a shaky laugh. "Felt good, you know, to stop being afraid." I clasped his shoulder. "That's how you start living again." As the crowd thinned, I looked around the park, families chatting freely, kids running where they used to whisper. Willow Bend was finally breathing again. Lauren slipped her hand into mine. "Tomorrow we file the civil claim," she said. "And by the end of next week, the HOA will have new elections." The sky above the lake reflected the last orange streaks of sunset. For the first time in months, the place looked alive instead of staged. Cynthia Grover's reign had ended not with violence or vengeance, but with exposure, math, and courage from the ones she underestimated most. The following morning, Willow Bend didn't wake to birdsong or sprinklers. It woke to the sound of moving trucks. Cynthia's driveway was blocked by a pair of county vehicles, a deputy standing beside them with folded arms and a clipboard. Word spread fast. By the time Lauren and I walked down the street, half the neighborhood had gathered on the sidewalks, coffee cups in hand, watching in silence. The empire she'd built on threats and bylaws was finally being dismantled, one box, one signature, one humiliation at a time. Cynthia Grover stood in her doorway, hair undone, wearing a pale gray sweater instead of her usual armor of blazers. She wasn't yelling for once. She wasn't even pretending to smile. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was disbelief, like someone who'd forgotten that rules could apply to her, too. Lauren leaned close and whispered, "Angela got the seizure order. Her house is collateral for restitution." "That fast?" I asked. "She moved HOA funds through a personal LLC. There's no recovery path. The county gets first claim." Across the street, Graham Lowe stood with a few residents near the sidewalk, arms folded, eyes down. He looked conflicted, but when Cynthia's gaze found him, he didn't look away this time. Their eye contact lasted a heartbeat, long enough to break whatever grip she'd had on him for years. The deputy gestured for Cynthia to sign the form on his clipboard. She hesitated, jaw trembling, then scrawled her signature and stepped back. The seal of the court glinted at the top of the page, proof that her power, once absolute, now belonged to someone else. "Think she'll fight it?" I asked quietly. Lauren shook her head. "She can't. She has nothing left to fight with." But she was wrong about one thing. People like Cynthia don't disappear quietly. They stage their exits like speeches. The moment the movers carried out the first box, Cynthia turned to the crowd. "You think you've won?" she said, her voice hoarse but sharp enough to cut the morning air. "You think you've saved this neighborhood? You've destroyed it. Without order, without standards, this place will rot. You'll regret cheering for chaos." No one answered. Some looked away. Others just stared, unblinking. Lauren stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "Order built on fear isn't order, Cynthia. It's a dictatorship with manicured lawns." Cynthia's mouth opened to reply, but nothing came out. She just looked around, at the faces of people she'd fined, lectured, and humiliated for years, and saw no loyalty left. The deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're ready to escort you off the property." She turned toward her door one last time, then walked down the path past me. When she reached the curb, she paused. "You did this," she said softly, voice stripped of venom. "You and your lawyer wife." I met her eyes. "No, Cynthia. You did this when you stopped caring about people." For the first time, she didn't have an answer. She climbed into her car, shut the door, and drove away without looking back. A ripple of sound moved through the crowd, half relief, half disbelief. Someone started clapping. Then another joined. Within seconds, the entire street erupted into applause that rolled down the cul-de-sac like thunder. Graham walked over, shoulders still tense. "It's strange," he said quietly. "You spend years scared of someone, and then they're just gone." Lauren nodded. "That's how tyranny ends, slowly at first, then all at once." Angela arrived shortly after with her team, clipboard under her arm, face bright with efficiency. "The court's officially appointed a temporary receiver to manage the HOA," she said, "and you two are on the list of recommended advisors." Lauren blinked. "Advisors?" Angela smiled. "Willow Bend needs structure rebuilt, financial, legal, procedural. You're the only ones who've proven you can handle it." I looked around at the crowd, neighbors waving, some already volunteering to help clean the clubhouse, others removing the violation signs still nailed to fences. "Guess we're rebuilding from the ground up," I said. Lauren smiled faintly. "That's what you do best." The afternoon stretched golden and warm, kids running along the sidewalks for the first time without being shushed. The air felt lighter, as if the neighborhood itself had exhaled. Later, when the crowd thinned, Graham lingered by the fountain. "Ethan," he said, "for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I thought silence would keep things peaceful." I shook his hand firmly. "Peace built on silence never lasts. You helped fix it when it counted." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Maybe now we can make this place worth living in again." As the sun dipped low, the rosebush outside our house caught the last light, petals glowing like embers. It had survived fire, storms, and cruelty, and now it bloomed freely again, a symbol of everything we'd fought for. Cynthia's house sat empty at the end of the street, its blinds drawn tight, but for the first time in years, Willow Bend felt alive. The next weekend, Willow Bend gathered for what used to be the HOA's most dreaded event, the quarterly board meeting. Only this time, it wasn't a tribunal, it was a reckoning. For the first time in years, no one stood at the podium with a clipboard or a stack of citations. The rows of chairs filled with residents instead of fear. You could feel it. The air itself had changed. Conversations weren't whispered anymore. People laughed, greeted neighbors, brought their kids. It felt like a town finally remembering it was a community. Lauren and I stood near the front, the smell of fresh coffee and rain-damp wood filling the old community hall, now serving as a temporary forum. Angela Perez from the Insurance Bureau sat to one side, along with a city liaison and a representative from the county's civil court. The temporary HOA receiver, a soft-spoken woman named Joyce Hartman, stepped to the podium. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began. "As most of you know, we're here to finalize the reformation of Willow Bend Estate's governing structure and to discuss the resolution of the Grover case." A murmur spread through the crowd at Cynthia's name. Joyce raised a hand for quiet. "Ms. Grover has been found liable for financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. The court has approved asset seizure to repay misappropriated funds. Her personal property will be liquidated to restore the HOA's emergency reserves." The room erupted, some gasps, some applause. I watched Graham sitting in the second row, shoulders straight for the first time since I'd met him. His hand trembled slightly when people turned to pat his back. He didn't look proud, just free. Joyce continued, "Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the residents who helped expose the truth and rebuild this association on transparency and fairness. Ethan and Lauren Rowe, please stand." Applause rolled through the room. My instinct was to stay seated, but Lauren nudged me up. I wasn't used to this kind of attention. Vindication felt quieter in my mind. But when I met Angela's approving nod from across the hall, I realized the victory wasn't ours alone. It belonged to every person who had once stayed silent out of fear. Joyce gestured to the microphone. "Mr. Rowe, would you like to say a few words?" I stepped forward, heart pounding, and looked out at the sea of faces. "I moved to Willow Bend because I believed in order," I began. "In structure, in accountability. But somewhere along the line, order turned into oppression. We stopped asking why things were done. We just obeyed. Cynthia Grover didn't build a community. She built compliance. And we let her." The room went still. People leaned forward, listening. "But here's the thing about systems," I continued. "They don't fail because of one corrupt person. They fail when good people stop looking, when they trade their voice for comfort. What happened here, what happened to my daughter, never should have happened. And now that it has, we don't get to forget. We get to do better." A ripple of applause broke through, swelling until it filled the room. I saw Graham stand, clapping the hardest of them all, his expression raw, with something between pride and penance. Lauren took the microphone next. Her voice was calm, precise. The voice of a lawyer who had spent her career dismantling injustice piece by piece. "The new bylaws we're adopting today protect residents from financial exploitation, from unchecked authority, and from intimidation disguised as regulation. No more secret meetings, no more selective enforcement, and no more silence when something feels wrong." That last sentence echoed like a promise. Then Joyce invited Angela Perez to speak. Angela's professionalism never cracked, but even she smiled as she looked around the room. "I've worked with dozens of communities," she said, "but very few have had the courage to face their problems publicly. What you did here will serve as a model for reform across the county. And yes, Ms. Grover's case is being referred to the district attorney for prosecution." That announcement detonated like thunder. The crowd stood cheering. For the first time, people didn't look scared. They looked alive. Even the kids clapped, not understanding the details, but sensing the shift in energy, the exhale of something long overdue. When the noise settled, Graham stood again, voice trembling. "Before we adjourn, I need to say something." The room quieted instantly. He turned toward Lauren and me. "For years, I helped Cynthia keep the books closed. I told myself it wasn't my place to question her. But when I saw what she did to your daughter, I realized silence was complicity. I can't undo what I did, but I can make sure it never happens again." Lauren crossed the room, shook his hand, and said softly, That's all any of us can do. By the time Joyce officially adjourned the meeting, the crowd was standing again, clapping until the sound filled every corner of the old hall. The energy felt electric, cathartic, like watching light break through after a storm. As we stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The sidewalks glistened under the streetlights. Kids rode bikes past the fountain. No one shouted, no one scolded. The neighborhood was quiet, but not afraid, just alive in a way it hadn't been for years. Lauren looked at me, smiling through exhaustion. "You realize this is just the beginning, right?" "Yeah," I said, glancing at the clubhouse, its windows reflecting the soft glow of street lamps. "But for once, we're starting clean." Behind us, the crowd lingered, neighbors laughing under umbrellas. The sound of hope had finally replaced the sound of fear. When dawn broke over Willow Bend the next morning, the neighborhood looked different. Not physically, every house was still lined up in symmetrical perfection, but something invisible had shifted. The fear that used to hum beneath the surface was gone. The silence that once followed Cynthia Grover's footsteps had been replaced by the quiet rhythm of normal life. Mowers starting, kids laughing, the smell of coffee drifting across open porches. For the first time in years, the streets belonged to the people again. Lauren stood by the kitchen window, sunlight touching her face. "It feels strange," she said, "like the air's lighter." I nodded, stepping beside her. "That's what happens when control dies. The air learns to breathe again." Outside, the mailbox overflowed with letters, thank you notes, invitations, even a few checks from neighbors pitching in for legal costs. The same people who once crossed the street to avoid conversation now waved when I passed. Fear had kept them apart. Truth had welded them together. We spent that morning walking through the neighborhood. The clubhouse, once Cynthia's private stage, had been transformed overnight. The old board members only sign was gone, replaced by a handwritten banner taped across the door. Community Open Forum. Everyone welcome. Inside, the smell of coffee mixed with fresh paint. Volunteers, people who had once trembled at Cynthia's name, were repainting the walls. Graham was there too, rolling a second coat over the back wall. He looked up when we walked in, his face streaked with paint but lighter somehow. "Never thought I'd enjoy painting this place," he said, half laughing. "Feels like washing something dirty clean." Lauren smiled. "That's exactly what it is." Across the room, Joyce from the receiver's office organized a new bulletin board covered in notes. Instead of violations, they listed birthdays, community events, donation drives. A calendar with bright markers hung beneath it. Order hadn't disappeared. It had just been reclaimed by compassion. After lunch, a small crowd gathered by the fountain, where a temporary stage had been set for the first open election in years. Kids waved small handmade signs for their parents, couples clapped, and even the retired veterans from the East Block, men who'd spent years arguing about lawn height, showed up grinning. Joyce stepped up first, addressing the crowd. Willow Bend Estates will now operate under transparent bylaws ratified by its residents. Every financial transaction, every decision, every meeting will be public record. Today, we elect the new leadership that will carry this community forward. She called Lauren's name first. The applause was so loud she froze for a second, caught off guard. "Me?" she asked, but people were already cheering, chanting her name. "You're the one who taught us what fairness looks like," Joyce said, smiling. Lauren turned to me as she climbed the steps to the microphone. "Guess this makes you first gentleman of Willow Bend," she whispered with a smirk. I grinned. "I'll settle for groundskeeper." Her speech was simple. No theatrics, no rehearsed lines. "This community isn't about lawns or fines or fences," she said. "It's about people. We forgot that for a while, but we've remembered now. And remembering is what keeps a neighborhood alive." The crowd erupted again, a wave of sound that carried through the trees. Graham, standing beside me, clapped the loudest. His eyes shimmered with relief. "She did it," he said softly. "You both did." I looked toward the far end of the street, where Cynthia's house sat dark and empty. For a moment, I felt an odd mix of victory and pity. Power had been her entire identity. Without it, she was just another neighbor who'd forgotten how to live among others. Later, as the sun dipped low, I walked back to our yard. The rosebush glowed red under the fading light, taller than it had ever been. Its roots had survived boiling water, storms, and neglect. It didn't just endure, it bloomed. Lauren joined me, her hand slipping into mine. Do you ever think about how close we came to losing this? Every day, I said. But sometimes you have to let something burn before you rebuild it right. She leaned her head on my shoulder as the neighborhood lights flickered on one by one. In the distance, laughter echoed from the park. For the first time, Willow Bend sounded like home. As the camera of the moment widened in my mind, the scene wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, earned honestly and built to last. And I realized that even if our story ended here, its echo would reach every gated street where someone thought power meant immunity. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.